This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, and principal second violin and artistic administrator, Merwin Siu. Our entire program today is inspired by an upcoming concert. It's happening this Saturday, January 20th at 8 o'clock p.m. in the Stranahan Theater. It is Singin' in the Rain, the famous 1952 film with Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, Debbie Reynolds. That'll be on the screen. The Toledo Symphony will be backing them up live with the music. You can find more information at ToledoSymphony.com or call them up, 419-246-8000.
Singing in the rain, what a glorious feeling.
So, Singing in the Rain, does anybody want to talk a little bit about that concert first? Let people know what's going on?
Sure.
Zach?
So it's one of my favorite films, Singing in the Rain. Wonderful music, some great physical comedy. It's just become such an iconic musical, and we get the privilege of performing all of the music along to the film live, and that's tricky because if you think about, there's the song "Make 'Em Laugh," which is one of my favorite 3 minutes of movie history right there. There's a lot of physical comedy that has to be timed perfectly to the music. I think he jumps over couches and slams into walls and on cue. So, we'll have our work cut out for us, but it's just great music. And of course, Gene Kelly whistling down the street to Singing in the Rain.
So how does this work? You have their singing voices and then the orchestra is isolated, right?
That's right.
And you're filling in the orchestral part.
Exactly.
Wow,
Exactly.
what a challenge.
It's all the more reason it has to line up because you can't go get Debbie Reynolds and Gene Kelly to come back from the dead and, sing their lines.
And that's a sad thing because we were actually debating about whether to do this production when we found out that Debbie Reynolds passed away.
Yeah.
This was in December of 2016, I believe.
Right.
So it kind of made this choice and movie all the more appropriate.
Well, I mean, after she passed, there were a lot of tributes online. And one of the number one tributes I think that I saw shared on social media was that fantastic dance with her and Donald O'Connor and Gene Kelly where they're singing Good Morning and, people even recreating that online in tribute to her. Yeah. She was only 18 years old, when she made that film.
Amazing.
Back in 1952. It was her breakout role. I've got a few fun facts about Singing in the Rain. As you may know, it's a movie that portrays Hollywood of the 1920s, the transition from silent films into talkies. And some interesting stories here, most of them about how difficult it was to pull off all those dancing moves and dance numbers. Gene Kelly supposedly drove Debbie Reynolds to tears because he was such a perfectionist. She was discovered under a table crying by Fred Astaire, who took her out and gave her some dance lessons and helped prop her up a little bit.
But, amazing.
Not to depict Gene Kelly as sort of, the heavy in this story because he really believed in her and wanted her for that part. But, evidently they spent 14 hours shooting that dance number, Good Morning, and her feet were bleeding, at the end. Wow. And she had to, go and take care of that. But also, like Donald O'Connor was a 4-pack a day smoker. And after he finished Make 'Em Laugh filming that, he had to he was bedridden for a few days, trying to recover. And then they lost all the footage and he had to go back and do it again.
Are you serious?
Oh, wow.
And so that's what we see in the film is that second time. Even Gene Kelly, was sick with a fever because Singing in the Rain, they didn't really use rain. They used some kind of weird mixture of liquids that shrunk his wool suit, evidently. And, these were back in the days when you didn't have quite all the workplace protections that you may have nowadays.
It's funny you mentioned that about his suit getting shrunk because you can clearly see that it's not a water effect. It's not a tinsel that they're stringing in front of the camera to make it look like it's raining. He is soaked.
Yeah.
He is so soaked and splashing in those puddles is perhaps one of the most enjoyable things to do as a kid, but you don't see many adults doing what he was doing. And that's probably why it's so iconic.
I guess it was water mixed with milk. That's what I'm seeing in my notes here. 6 hours of fake rain each day. He spent 7 days filming it on the MGM backlot. Wow. And so he had a bad cold and he had developed a fever.
And a lactose intolerance.
After that, never wanted to see milk or water, probably, after that experience. So, despite all that, I mean, just kind of gives you an idea of the blood, sweat, and tears and milk that went into making the film. And it all is such a magical experience.
It really is.
On the screen.
It really is.
So we're going to have a discussion today and some examples and a quiz even, all about film music and how music is used in films. And one of the first things that I wanted, incidentally, one thing I forgot to mention about Singing in the Rain is, almost all of those songs were pre-existing. I mean, there were only a couple of songs, I think, that were written specifically for Singing in the Rain. Make 'Em Laugh is one of them. But Singing in the Rain, that song was already a hit by like the 1930s. People had recorded it and sung it before it appeared in the movie. Now, can you tell me, first quiz question here, what other movie about 20 years later famously used Singing in the Rain to a completely different effect than what Gene Kelly was doing? You could say almost the opposite effect. Anything come to mind? Yes? No?
So we're looking at the early 70s.
Yeah. It also...
Totally opposite effect with no justification or knowledge whatsoever. I'm just going to go Clockwork Orange.
That's right. You got it.
Nice.
Clockwork Orange.
Wow, totally guessed that.
Yeah. Malcolm McDowell.
Did you really?
Yes, that was totally out of the blue.
I got to watch it again.
Yes.
Malcolm
been a long
McDowell
way.
sings it while he's like,
yes.
victimizing somebody, beating him up and smacking him with his cane.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember thinking that Beethoven got such a bad rap in that
Right.
movie, but then I said, well, Singing in the Rain also got kicked around.
Well, that was Malcolm O'Dowell's idea that he would sing that, right? And he told Stanley Kubrick, and during their lunch break, Kubrick went and pursued the permission to use it in the film, and they secured it and filmed it, and there it was.
That's amazing.
So, but luckily the 1950s movie stands on its own.
Yeah.
Happily.
Right? That's the memory that people have.
It's one of the few movies that I've been able to stumble across. It is a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
So even those nasty film snobs can't say it's a movie that could ever be improved.
Yeah.
I think in a sense, if you really trust any of these lists, it is the number one movie musical on that sort of a listing.
There was an AFI list
I
about
think
movie musicals, and I
yeah.
think it was up toward the top on that as well.
Yeah.
So it's just fun. And so that's what we get to do is, entertain our audience with this great movie, with great music, and hopefully we all bring ponchos.
Do you do the whole movie all the way straight through, or is there an intermission? Oh, okay.
I think there might be an intermission. We'll
Forget what I said.
Yeah, I think there will be an intermission, but it's actually one of the great things because we get to see a young Debbie Reynolds at this event, and we actually had Debbie Reynolds appear, and it was one of the really kind of great, unforgettable moments for me when I was very kind of early in the Toledo Symphony.
Now, you told me you have a Debbie Reynolds story, but you're not so sure if we can use it on the radio.
Well, that's okay. This is totally live radio.
Well, if we have people listening, if they hear some beeping, that's why.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that's amazing about her as a live performer is she was totally 100% cognizant of her image with the public, which is this, kind of wholesome American icon and also Princess Leia's mother. Yeah. And her entire show was basically spent gleefully puncturing that image, often with ribald humor. And we never really expected that. It was a very nice, calm dress rehearsal. And at the time, Carl Topola was conducting, and the orchestra did an orchestra alone first half, and I happened to do a solo on that half. And it's Vieuxtemps Souvenir d'Amérique, but really what it is variations on Yankee Doodle. That's what the piece is. Yeah. So I played that and went off stage, and Debbie Reynolds was there. And she said, "Are you the young man who just played the violin?" And me, still holding said violin, was like, yeah, that was me. And she said, "That was amazing playing. You almost made me arrive, if you know what I mean." And then for a split second, I didn't know what she meant. And then all of a sudden, I did know what she meant. And then I think I blacked out. It was just one of the most... I don't really get speechless very often. And I I had no idea what to say. I think I ran all the way backstage around the crossover. So
Poor little Merwin.
yeah, it was a very she totally totally had my number there.
I mean, maybe she meant something else. Who knows?
I might not have known what she meant.
Yeah. It could be a completely different meaning. And just all these years,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
and your dirty mind, Merwin.
I saw the show. I think it was very much in consistent character
Yeah.
with the rest of the show.
Yeah. Okay.
I would suggest, gentlemen, that we talk about anything else at this point.
Yeah. Well, we can leave that story in. That's a good story. So I asked you to not bring examples, but bring your favorite film score music and how it worked in the movie and why you think it belongs at the top of your list. And you want to go ahead, Zach, and talk about some of your favorites?
Sure. So when I think about music in movies, it's not that this score has a really prominent point, but for me, it's how well the score aligns with the entire movie. So it almost becomes a silent character for the movie. So I have 4 films that I've singled out that achieve this for me, and in no particular order. They're Field of Dreams, The Mission, The Piano, and Third Man. So Field of Dreams, one of my favorite movies just because there's so much magic and baseball in it. But James Horner did the soundtrack for that, and I think he just does a fantastic job of capturing that sort of cornfield magic. And I just love it. And there's something about it. I've listened to it for years, and I still love it. It's still a Desert Island CD for me. It's not quite classical music, and there's a lot of synthesizers in it, 1980s synthesizers, but I think it holds up nonetheless. The Mission is a soundtrack. I'm blanking who wrote it.
Ennio Morricone.
Thank you. It's probably a more famous soundtrack than the movie is. Movies stars Robert De Niro as a Jesuit missionary. But the music is just outstanding. And when I was a student at St. John's, it was kind of our soundtrack for St. John's. There was a teacher named Greg Richards who would play it during exams and test times. So that was just a way to help us all chill out with really pretty music. And when I finally did watch the movie, I thought it was kind of disappointing. But it's awesome. It's choral. It's orchestral.
Usually they say the book, is not as good as the book.
Yeah.
It's not as good as the
soundtrack
music.
isn't as good as the movie isn't as good as the soundtrack. And you could probably say the same for The Piano. Michael Nyman wrote a great soundtrack. So here we have another credible classical composer writing a 1990s soundtrack. He liked the music so much that he went on to write a piano concerto, which is a wonderful piece of music based on themes from the movie. So I really love that piece. And I think I love it more than the movie, but it just goes outside of the realm of the confines of a typical cinema. So and then Third Man is perhaps less it doesn't stand on its own as much. This is great music for the Orson Welles film, one of my favorite movies, British film, and it features the zither rather famously.
I actually have a little bit of it here, which I can bring up.
This is the Harry Lime theme, I bet. Just kind of goes as its own sort of leitmotif during the film. Oh, yes.
There we go.
You just know this is going to be a kooky film.
There's a great story about this. Orson Welles and Joseph Cotton, and they were...
there we go.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah.
They were having dinner, and they went down to the wine cellar, and this guy, the zither player, was performing. Anton Karas was performing for Tips. And they were like, I love this music. This is perfect for a movie. And they hired him to write the music. Yeah.
Wow. It's strange because if you took that film and you put a standard 1940s soundtrack onto it, I don't know that it would stand up as well. There's a scene with a Ferris wheel. where the song comes back in, and I just it wouldn't fit a Franz Waxman sensibility at all.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. Well, maybe I'll wait. I'll wait until after we hear from Merwin. Sure. But let's hear your Merwin.
You might want to change that because I'm totally departing from what's active. So Star Wars is number one for me. I think in terms of how important the music is as a character, there is a wonderful YouTube that goes around, which is the final throne room scene without the music.
Yeah,
and it's just laughably bad.
It's creepy.
And without the music, I mean, without that score, I mean, there's just no way that that movie is the incredibly epoch-defining movie that it is. I
don't think people realize how important the music can be.
It is so important in that movie.
And how it can make or break a film. I mean, I remember at the Kennedy Center Honors when John Williams got his honor, Steven Spielberg was one of the speakers, and he said, John Williams, not Steven Spielberg, George Lucas,
yeah.
I think, said, the best thing that ever happened to me in my career was John Williams, without a doubt.
Spielberg might say the same.
It might have been Spielberg who said it.
Wow.
But either one. I'm sure they both would express the same.
I remember when Star Wars was released in the 90s when they cleaned up everything digitally and had the soundtrack reprocessed into surround sound. So I'm sitting there at massive theater and the music starts and everybody cheered.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You knew it was coming, but man, it sounded great.
Yeah. Not to interrupt, Merwin.
But I think the other movie in a totally different vein would probably be South Park, the movie. Bigger, longer, and uncut.
That's a Canadian thing.
This is the second time this has shown up on this podcast.
Absolutely. But I think it's a wonderful... It's when you really realize that, wow, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, these are really, really good writers. And you hear Book of Mormon coming in this.
Right.
And I absolutely, there's whatever patriotic Canadian element in there. It's wonderful to have the late Robin Williams perform Blame Canada on the Academy Awards and somehow navigate that without having to be beeped out. I think he beeps himself a couple of times.
Yeah, that was probably the most beepless song from the film.
From that particular...
Or from Robin Williams, for that matter.
Yeah.
But it is, in terms of the actual movie soundtrack that I will actually put into a CD player and listen to, that's the one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking about a musical, there is no film without the music. Yeah. The music, it should be front and center for musicals.
But I think it's one of the very few times where you get you're surprised that it's a musical. Like when you walk into the movie, you never really expect the level of quality of the music.
That's
it was
really true.
Really great music.
Well, talking about music being front and center and sort of being one of the characters in the film, my choice was, I don't know, a lot of people might argue with this, but I like the way that Hans Zimmer, the composer, used music in the film Interstellar. I don't know if you saw that or not, but the organ is sort of the main...
the foundation almost.
The foundation of the orchestra. There's a lot of electronic or electronic music that goes on as well, but the music at times in the film, the way it's balanced against the dialogue and the background noise and the sound effects, the music almost drowns it out in some places. So it has there's something ironic about this kind of drone, organ, overwhelming music happening in the vacuum of space that I found very attractive. And he also has... it's very simple in the way that he just repeats a lot of phrases throughout the whole piece. And I've got just a little excerpt here. So that's a theme that gets repeated throughout the piece. You hear that over and over again. And I latched onto it somehow, and it really reminds me a lot of this piece. See if you recognize this.
Yep. Los Sibelius.
That's amazing, yeah.
Sibelius' Fifth Symphony.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. I guess if you can't have Sibelius in your film, you can sort of do the poor man's Sibelius with Hans Zimmer. But yeah, now we all want to go back and listen to that.
I think he's a rich
symphony.
man at this point.
Yeah.
Sibelius or Hans Zimmer?
Hans Zimmer.
Zimmer.
Although he's like giving lessons online.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have.
Right, the Masterclass series.
Well,
Not that we want to put in a plug for Masterclass, but yeah.
if Felicia was here, I think one thing that both she and I one moment in kind of movie soundtrack history that both she and I like a lot is that moment from Up, with Michael Giacchino's soundtrack, and that's famously wordless and entirely. There's like a 3.5 minute condensation of a married couple's life, and all you have is the music, and that's just an amazing musical moment.
Well, yeah, and this brings up the little Facebook poll that I did online. I put a shout out for people to tell me what your favorite film music is and why. I had a lot of responses coming back to me, including Felicia, because we knew she wasn't going to be here today. She mentioned Up. She also mentioned Titanic, La La Land, and then K-19, The Widowmaker.
That's a submarine movie, right?
Yeah, I have to read her comment, though. It's music by Klaus Badelt. Impressive how he could compose music that is so full of doom and hope at the same time. Dives deeper than surface emotions. Also very Russian, and I like that. And later she said something about get it, dives deeper. It's a submarine movie. Okay. Just in case that was lost on us.
I love it.
So we miss having Felicia in the studio.
She's
Hi,
here
Felicia.
Here in spirit. Some of the other people that responded, I mean, there was a huge rainbow of music and composers and people talking about some rather obscure films, and then, all the usual suspects. I mean, I have to say at the top of the pack was John Williams, whether it was Star Wars or
Schindler's
other
List. I
movies
saw
of
a lot.
his. Yeah, but also people like Bernard Herrmann, a lot of votes for his scores. Ennio Morricone, whom you mentioned, Thomas Newman, and Michael Nyman. Kind of fun that Michael Nyman himself actually participated. Somebody said, somebody posted about how they loved the score to the piano and they listened to it all the time. And, I tagged Michael Nyman in that post, and he came back and responded. He's like, "Oh, you're so kind." And then this person, was quite impressed with Michael Nyman. So, Jerry Goldsmith, John Barry, even Philip Glass was mentioned. A couple of old school mentions of like Prokofiev, right, and Alexander Nevsky, which sometimes orchestras take those old films and play the scores against them as well. I had Ricky Ian Gordon, who is a wonderful composer, mention Gerald Busby's score for Robert Altman's Three Women, which I've not heard before. I have to go back and listen to that. Christopher Rouse, who, among other things, was composer residence for the New York Philharmonic. He liked Thomas Newman's American Beauty. Also, Altered States, which was by John Corigliano, if you remember.
Oh, right.
Yeah. That was a cool film score.
And he also did the music for the Red Violin, which was rather fantastic.
Yeah, and there were one or two people who mentioned Red Violin as well. We had Christopher O'Reilly weigh in. He's the host of From the Top that airs on this station. He voted for Bernard Herrmann. Soprano Christine Goerke voted for John Williams. And she was mentioned recently in an article in the New Yorker talking about John Williams and the leitmotif system that he adapted for Star Wars, right? That's something that we have in the Wagner operas, Siegfried's Horn Call, bum, bum, ba, da, ba, 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 that plays over and over again. And in Star Wars, it might be ba, 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 right?
Or Princess Leia's theme.
Here's the quiz. You say the name of a theme, and I'll sing it for you. This is how well I know Star Wars, right? But evidently, there's a whole compendium of Star Wars themes online that you can find. So if you go looking for that Alex Ross article in the New Yorker, you can find a link to all of the different themes and fragments of themes. And he and other folks have been saying that the score to The Last Jedi is John Williams' best yet, because it takes all those old themes and kind of breaks them apart and reassembles them and has little bits and pieces that reflect what's happened to the characters, right? In very subtle ways.
I remember when I was living in Boston, the choir I sang with got to do a concert with the Boston Pops and John Williams. It was all his music, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
But we did some of the music from the first of the new, I should say, the first of the prequels, and he created a language for it. We had to learn a language in order to sing the song. And then he came in and we had rehearsed before working with him, and he criticized our pronunciation of his own made up language. And you just think about that.
Wait, who is this?
John Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you're John Williams, you get to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. I've told you my John Williams story.
You tell me yours, I'll tell you mine.
When I met him once, and I told him, I said, Mr. Williams, I love your music. When I was in junior high, I used to make arrangements of your themes for my jazz band. And he looked at me in all seriousness and he said, that's illegal. And, I felt my heart sink into the ground and I didn't know what to say. And then he smiled and he said he was just kidding, that he was flattered. But, I don't know if he was just kidding or not. I think
it is illegal.
He saw the tears welling up in my eyes and, tried to be nice.
My John Williams story, my other John Williams story, I should say, is I was racing for a meeting in Boston, and I was trying to get around the public garden and the Boston Common via a bunch of very small side streets, and I was driving far too fast, and I was coming up, I think, on Arlington Street, and I saw an older gentleman step off the curb, and I was driving irresponsibly, and I knew I could stop before the intersection, but I didn't know I had to stop 4 feet before the intersection to avoid hitting somebody. Ooh. And there was a younger man with the older man who, takes the older man under the arms and pulls him back up onto the sidewalk. And as I get to the intersection and, my eyes are clenched, I look up and it's John Williams. And I got to this meeting, which was hilariously at the Handel and Haydn Society. And I said, guys, I'm sorry I'm late. This is what just happened. Yeah. I almost killed John Williams. And one of the people in the room looked at me and he said, well, why'd you stop?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
You see, I would have reframed that and said let me tell you about the time that I saved John Williams' life. By not hitting him, right?
It's good. That's all positioning.
Yeah.
Something interesting, though, what we did, we started talking about a musical movie, and interestingly, a movie that's not a musical that existed on Broadway before. It's not like Music Man, where the movie is just a movie adaptation of what was on stage, right? Singing in the Rain was a movie musical. And then we started talking about our favorite music from movies, and I don't think any one of us has mentioned a musical.
Yeah.
Right? We've all talked about score composers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Merlin
except, South Park.
South Park. One of the great movie musicals. Now, this is what Toledo Symphony has to do. Can you do like South Park instead of Singing in the Rain? Singing in the Rain.
Can you work some of your Canadian Jedi magic?
Yeah.
I feel like we've already sold tickets to Singing in the Rain. Yeah. It would be a bit of a bait and switch.
This would be for future seasons, though.
We do have a 75th anniversary coming up.
Yeah.
We could do something spectacular.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see you at the movies.
I'm singing in the rain.
Again, that concert is this weekend. It's Saturday evening, 8 o'clock p.m. This is at the Stranahan Theater, Singing in the Rain on the screen with the music from the Toledo Symphony performed live. ToledoSymphony.com. Go to the website there. You can find out more or call up the box office at 419-246-8000. Toledo Symphony Lab is generously underwritten by a gift from the estate of Barbara Garwood and is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of this program as a podcast by going to our website at WGTE.org or subscribing on Apple Podcasts. I'm Brad Cresswell, and this has been Toledo Symphony Lab on FM 91.